All right, so we can go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tiffany Digby. I am a counseling intern at the Counseling Center, so I'm currently a doctoral student. And today's presentation or the webinar that I'm presenting on with you all this afternoon is Against All Odds, something that's specific just to our first gen students and something that's really important for me. So I'm glad that you all are with me, and the whole point of today really is for us to talk about how to achieve academic success and psychological well-being as we're navigating COVID-19 and the pandemic. So even before we start, I think it's important to create some kind of community and an understanding of who exactly are first gen students. And the reason I do that, it's just so important for me for you all to understand that whatever struggles you all are going through, you're not going through that alone. So our first gen students at Texas State make up 46% of our entire student body population, which is so significant. Looking at the numbers just from the spring, that's almost 11,000 students. And so some of the things that are important are making sure that you all can create a sense of community, not only amongst yourselves, but just to have that support. And so if you're not familiar with First Bobcat Proud, that is one organization that's really helpful for our first gen students in order for you all to create a community and get the support that our students need. So before we start talking about what exactly is academic success and what are the challenges that each of you may be struggling with or kind of navigating through, I'd like to take time to talk about a survey that was done specifically for our first gen students at Texas State. And these are concerns and issues that were brought up by your peers. This was conducted this summer. So I'm not going to get really technical and go into all the specifics of the research and what was found, but I just feel like it's really important to kind of share what your peers shared, which I'm sure are things that you are continuing to talk about. So in this survey, it was called the COVID-19 First Gen Survey. And so what the findings implicated were that a lot of our first gen students were struggling with certain issues that were very common to all of you. So the participants in the survey, the majority of them were Hispanic, so that made up 51%. 32% of the respondents were white, 12% Black, African American, and then 4% were Asian. And so the reason I'm sharing this with you today, like I said, is it provides context into why I chose to do this webinar for each of you and the concerns that your peers expressed at the university. And as many of you know, this past spring, because of COVID, the majority of our students, or all students, had to transition to remote learning. And so the First Gen Proud Committee decided to look at how COVID was impacting all of our students. And this is how we were able to gather this information from each of you. So just to make it brief, one of the most significant things that we noticed was, of course, living situations changed. 76% of our students had to move back home with their families. 12% of you reported only having to transition to other kind of housing outside of your immediate families. 10% said that you actually had to move in with friends and relatives. And then 3% were just kind of transition, maybe living from here to there in different kind of situations. But the reason I highlight this is that the stability of your living situation changed, which adds complex stressors to your own functioning and to your academic success. The other thing that I found so important were the primary sources of support change. So as COVID came in, 44% of our students said that they relied solely on their friends and other peers for support. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if I think about a student who is struggling with maybe stress or just depression or anxiety or just any kind of other personal conflicts, it is so hard to rely on our friends to give us that constant support. And sometimes we want the feedback from someone else who may not be having our same experiences and someone who can give a different perspective. So the idea that the majority of students are relying on students and friends just really struck me. And of course, that 33% said that they didn't have anybody that they could reach out to for support during all this uncertainty. And of course, like financial stability decline, that's not something that is new or surprising. We're all very aware of that, but this does add an extra pressure and an extra strain on all of our first gen students. So just acknowledging that 71% of our students reported that there was just a decline in their financial stability and just how much pressure that put on our students. What we'll focus on obviously for the rest of this session of our conversation is going to be psychological wellness. And so in this survey, they asked, since the beginning of the social distancing, how has your condition and feeling changed with respect to your psychological wellness? And overall, 62% of our students said that their psychological well-being became worse or even worse than it was before. And that's huge. A lot of the responses that we read, that we received from this survey and feedback was that the students were struggling and they didn't feel that they were getting the support they needed from campus resources and even from our counseling department. So again, the reason I'm really highlighting this is because I want all of our student voices, all of our first gen student voices to be heard and to let you know that we're hearing that your needs are being missed and how we can possibly help you. The other struggle or things that I hear a lot from my students, and not just first gen students, but all students in general, is that this transition from in-person to remote learning put significant strain in just how you define and achieve academic success. Now, I'm not going to read both of those quotes, but the very first one I think gives the best example or a good snapshot as to what our students are kind of struggling with. And it says the change to remote learning has been very difficult, and it seems that most professors are not prepared for this type of environment. It's understandable, but it absolutely dampens the quality of information we are learning. And that is something that I have heard from all of our students. Just this transition and being able to navigate all of the multiple platforms that your professors are using has been difficult. And there are some things and tools that I will give you and provide each of you as we get a little more into achieving academic success. So what I would hope for all of you to kind of take just for me being able to introduce this information from the survey is that our first generation students are resilient. We know this, you know this. You've accomplished so much already. You have persevered to be able to get to where you are, your goals. All of this is important to you. Your success is important to you. Making yourself, making family, making friends, those other important people in your life proud is important. So what I found so interesting is despite everything that's going on, 81% of our first gen students are completely dedicated to completing this degree because it falls in line with their values and with their goals. What that lets me know, just as my role as a clinician at the counseling center, is how can we as a staff support each and every one of you to make sure you achieve your academic success and maintain psychological well-being. So some of the unique challenges, just to kind of put them out, and we've talked about them specifically in the survey, but now I want to transition into what they generally look like in addition to everything that we have going on in our world even now. So if we think about finances, financial obligation is definitely a unique challenge because many of our first gen students have this obligation of either continuing to work while they're in school, or they're relying completely on financial aid, scholarships, or grants, and understanding how your grades are so imperative to being able to maintain those grants and scholarships. So that's an extra pressure. Resources, not knowing what resources are available for you as students is also a challenge. There are numerous organizations, numerous resources all around campus that are aimed to help all of our students to succeed. But coming in as a freshman or transitioning or transferring in from another university, you may not be aware of those resources. Even students who have been at the university for a while, I still have students sit in my office and say, I didn't even know that was something I could utilize. And so I will provide some of that information a little later in the presentation. Another challenge is, of course, how do we achieve academic success and what are the hindrances to that? Pressures to succeed are one, and there's a plane, so I'm trying to be mindful of that. But pressures to succeed is huge. You understand the sacrifices that your families have made, the own sacrifices you have made for yourself to be successful. And so you're trying to keep up with just making sure that you're making everybody and yourself proud. And that puts a lot of pressure on us, not even including the idea of like COVID, the pandemic, finances. So as you can see, all of this is building up. And that's what I'm trying to explain here as I talk about these challenges. Adjusting to college is so common. Many times, of course, our first year students, it's the first time away from family or home. So just transitioning into college, if you're transferring in, it's the same thing. But even just adjusting to the changes between what high school looked like and the expectations and what academic success looked like then to what it looks like in undergrad and in graduate school, it's so vastly different. So just learning and understanding what that looks like is so important. And of course, the lack of social connections. When you're new to a place, it's so hard to build those social connections. And then when we add that we're in a pandemic and there's social isolation, that of course adds to that. Familial concerns, that is talking about areas of like family responsibilities. A lot of times first gen students already have this obligation to kind of, perhaps you had a specific role when you were before starting college, a specific role to help the family in a certain way, whether that's working or helping to care for siblings or just being independent and living on your own. Those responsibilities don't go away just because you go to college. And so that's something else that you're kind of also, some of you may be also carrying. If I think about family conflict, sometimes that could look like you having this really like wonderful drive to be successful and to go to college. Perhaps parents not really understanding like why it's so important, or perhaps them understanding why it's so important and putting this pressure on you to be successful. And then lastly, of course, thinking about sociocultural factors, and not all first-gen students have a minority status, but that is an extra challenge. And then if we also talk about our current political climate, that also adds unique challenges for each of our first-gen students to kind of navigate. So now if we transition and think about COVID-19, right? So how is COVID-19 affecting us? COVID-19, like I said, is absolutely a new stressor. But what I want to highlight is that stress itself and how we manage stress is not new to any of us. We've all dealt with stress before in the past. We've all learned to navigate that and to be able to move past it. So thinking about this in that lens could be really helpful. So what I'm trying to explain is that I understand that COVID-19 is definitely causing things to change drastically from week to week. For those of us like myself who are planners, that is incredibly difficult. We want to have everything organized and well planned out. We can't have that. Even thinking about the things that may have given us some support and comfort in the past, like spending time with families, going for walks with our friends, hanging out with our friends, all of those things have changed. And so what I'm getting at is that although the impact of COVID-19 is significant and it's changed the way that we're functioning, the way we're relating to others, we can learn to adjust to this new stressor. It's something that we're all capable of. We just have to remind ourselves that although this is a new stressor, me learning how to deal with stress is not something new. And so that's what I'm hoping to convey. So as we continue with this presentation, I hope that we can learn about psychological well-being and then how to identify and cope with stress so that way we can achieve and maintain academic success. And that's what the rest of my presentation or our time together will kind of look at. So if we break down just the impact of COVID-19, specifically pertaining to academic success and psychological well-being, we're looking at academics. We know that there's a huge curve in adjusting to virtual learning. Not to say that none of us are familiar with technology, but understanding that some of our professors are using multiple platforms or just contacting us in different ways, it makes it really difficult to know when is this assignment due? When am I going to turn it in? And it just adds a lot of stress for you to be constantly checking in on other things. The other thing is going to be like access to necessary resources for distant learning. Some of our students are living on campus, some of them are off campus, some of them live in another city. And so being able to access some of the resources that are still available to you for distant learning is a challenge. We encourage our students who are living on campus or even those off campus really to utilize the library and the private study rooms. If you're coming to counseling, there are spaces that you can utilize, like in the building, that would provide like some privacy. But just looking at that, it's just that there is more difficulty accessing resources for distant learning, which is making it difficult for us to achieve success. The other thing is like missing assignments. If we're feeling really stressed and overwhelmed, especially with the stress of COVID and just adjusting to school, thinking about all the challenges that I mentioned before, all of that being on our plate, it's no wonder we don't have the motivation and the desire to kind of being able to complete our assignments. It might make you less likely to attend class. You're not going to want to go to class if you're feeling overwhelmed, even if it is on Zoom, right? So for those of you who are doing in person or half in person and half Zoom, like the idea of going to campus is probably incredibly difficult, or even just getting out of bed to log into the computer to attend like your classes online. And all of this could potentially lead to like having lower grades for your exams and courses. And so if I look at how COVID-19 has impacted mental health, and something that I've seen for all students, so not just our first gen students, all students, is that like our emotional and psychological fatigue is so intense right now. There is a lot of pressures that everyone is kind of dealing with, but if we add the pressures of for our first gen students, which I've highlighted before, it's no wonder some of us are feeling a little emotionally or psychologically fatigued. We talked about social adjustment concerns. So just learning how to adjust to being what this pandemic has forced us to kind of be in, right? So there's social distancing, and how are we building connections? We as beings need to have social connection with people. And although right now our safest way is to do that, like not in person, it is causing us to have declines in our mental health. There's a decreased feeling and just like a sense of life satisfaction, right? The things that we enjoyed doing before, we're not able to do anymore. So it's very normal for us to kind of feel like things aren't the way they used to be. I'm not feeling really happy. Things feel kind of blue. I'm feeling overwhelmed. So I say all of this because I'm trying to normalize this idea that everyone is kind of struggling and trying to learn how to adjust. And this impact of COVID-19, although it looks different for everyone, it's affecting all of us in one way or another. And so, of course, that last one is just the decrease in overall psychological well-being, which I've hinted on already. So as we start transitioning to looking at, okay, Tiffany, thanks. You've pointed out these struggles. You've pointed out how COVID is impacting us to making it difficult for us to create academic success and making it difficult for us to be psychologically well. What do we do about that? And so one of the first things I'd like for us to kind of talk about is academic success. So first of all, academic success looks different for everybody. Understanding how you define academic success for yourself is important. Many of you, like I said, are here either maybe on scholarships, financial aids, or grants, and understanding that your grades impact that. I get that. But even with all of that being said, you can still maintain a good GPA, maybe not the perfect GPA, but a good GPA. So how are you defining academic success for you? Remember that academic success is going to look drastically different than it did in high school versus how it's going to look now in college. And for those of you who will continue through graduate school, as I assume many of you will, how that's going to look, right? And so understanding that how you define your success in school is going to be a little fluid, and it's going to evolve as you continue. And especially now as we're in a pandemic, of course. So one thing is like asking yourself, where did these ideas come from? If you said like my idea of academic success is to have a perfect GPA, where does that come from? Like if I need to have a perfect GPA, or an idea of saying something like, if I don't get an A on this assignment, I'm failing myself or others. That puts a lot of pressure on you. So where are those ideas coming from, and how can you rewrite that message to make it more realistic and to fit yourself? Also, like, how does virtual learning play a factor in academic success? And I touched on this a little bit, but Having emotional flexibility and self-compassion for yourself is key. So what does that even mean, right? Sounds kind of hogwash. But like emotional flexibility is going to be your ability to say like, you know what, things are really difficult right now. I didn't understand that this is what was going to be happening. I've gotten through things in the past. How did I do that? And how can I apply that here? Right. So having the flexibility of saying, yes, things are tough, but I can navigate this. So, like we said, like I kind of hinted on, virtual learning, all the new academic demands that are being placed on you right now, the uncertainty of COVID-19, all of this are things that you're juggling. So asking yourself, how do I define academic success in our current realities right now is going to be imperative for you to creating that success. Some of this is going to have to be redefined, right? You may not have the perfect GPA, but you have a good GPA. I didn't get a perfect A or an A plus on this assignment, but I'm still passing. I still have my scholarships. I'm still being successful with everything else kind of going on in my life. So those are just things that I would like for each of you to keep in mind when trying to achieve academic success. Thinking about signs of stress. So the reason I incorporated this information is, how are we supposed to learn how to cope with something if we're not really sure how this is affecting us? So stress affects each different aspects of who we are in different ways. There are cognitive symptoms for stress, emotional symptoms, physical symptoms, and behavioral symptoms. So some of the cognitive symptoms of stress that will affect your ability to be present and in the here and now. So what does that mean? Of course, one thing you could have difficulty like with your memory. So forgetting to complete a task, perhaps being absent-minded, misplacing your keys, or even maybe your laptop could be something. Another symptom of a cognitive of stress affecting you cognitively would be an inability to concentrate or stay on task. So perhaps being easily distracted is very common. I hear that a lot. Having poor judgment is also very common. So perhaps making impulsive decisions, not thinking out the consequences of you not completing an assignment, maybe not going to work that day or not going to school. Another cognitive symptom that I think is important is like seeing only the negative in situations. So being pessimistic. And that might look like thinking of things as black and white, which is like I hinted earlier. I either have to have a perfect GPA or I'm failing myself and others, right? But there is a gray area. So reminding yourself of that. Another symptom is probably very common that you may have been familiar with is like having anxious or racing thoughts. So you feel like you just can't control these thoughts. And a good example of that is if you're working on one task, one assignment, and your mind is going off of a checklist of, I need to finish this, I need to finish that, and you're not even really close to even completing what you're working on. So that's a really good example of having like anxious or racing thoughts where you're just thinking about something else. If I go a little further and just kind of fast forward to like emotional symptoms, these are things that most of us are pretty common with. We're really common about how stress affects us emotionally, but this can include changes in your mood. So perhaps like your friends or loved ones are saying, hey, I've noticed that you've been a little moody or a little irritable. Being easily irritated and short-tempered is a really good indicator that you are starting to feel really stressed. Perhaps feeling overwhelmed by just about anything. So the smallest little things, like maybe your roommate left something on your side of the room, and that just causes like a whole like blow up or just an upset for you or just some distress. It's a really big indicator that, you know, I'm really feeling stressed right now. And then of course, more common symptoms would be like things like depression and anxiety. And that those tend to be really common indicators of like experiencing stress, like emotionally. If we look over a little bit to the right, we're looking at physical symptoms of stress. And so I feel like this gets mislooked a lot. Most people are really aware of like the emotional symptoms of stress, but physical symptoms tend to get misplaced. Like they don't really get acknowledged. And so I'm not how sure many of you may be familiar with this, but there is a connection between like our mind and our body. And so stress significantly impacts our physical health, and in a way that most of us are familiar with. You may have tension, headaches, you may have pain in your body. Some students talk about having like gastrointestinal symptoms, like an upset stomach, maybe dizziness and chest pain, rapid heartbeat, and those I tend to tie in with feelings of like an anxiety or a panic attack, right? Some people talk about like having a loss of sex drive or just having like frequent colds, so like a weakened immune system. And so paying attention to your body when you're feeling stressed is it's a huge tool for you to say, hey, I'm feeling a little stressed in my body. I need to find a way to cope with this. And then lastly, behavioral symptoms of stress. You may notice changes in your eating, perhaps in your sleeping habits, perhaps even how you relate to others. So you might find yourself withdrawing. Maybe your friends or your loved ones, your roommates are saying, hey, I've noticed you being just a little more quiet. You're not as engaged with us. You're not going out with us. That's an indicator that, you're feeling stressed. Of course, self-medicating with drugs or alcohol. Um, I know a lot of students will resort to this, and just to kind of keep in mind that anything that we put into our body changes our chemical compositions, which could have negative consequences and make like our symptoms of depression or anxiety even worse. And then nervous habits like biting your nails, pacing. One common thing I've seen from a lot of students, even just this semester, is getting up in the middle of the night and checking your email because you're concerned that a professor sent you something in the middle of the night. But just a little tidbit, if it's 2 in the morning, it's really unlikely that your professor will be sending in an assignment in order for you to have it due by like 8 or 9 that morning when you wake up. So get your sleep and rest assured that nothing is going to come through in the middle of the night that'll be due for you. And if it does, then refer to your syllabus, and that's your protection. So that's just a little tidbit that I'll share with you all there. So let's look at some tools for academic success. So creating work-life balance is so important. I know that's something that might sound cliche and maybe something you've already heard, but this is going to be important in order for you to be successful, and not just to achieve academic success, but psychological well-being and wellness also. So, what does work life balance even incorporate? We're looking at one's ability to set and maintain boundaries between your personal responsibilities, your work responsibilities, school, family, and social. And so, a lot of the times we might notice where like your friends are kind of pulling on you, hey, let's go out, let's go hang out, or your family saying, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, please come visit. It's the end of the semester, all of your assignments are due, you have to work, or you just need to take care of yourself. And so being able to set boundaries and tell people no is going to be so important. How are you putting yourself first in all of these arenas? That way you can maintain some balance. So looking at all your responsibilities and noticing that you can't give 100% to all of them. And so some things are going to have to change and fluctuate throughout your semester, throughout the week, really throughout life, not just for school. It's also going to be so important for you to develop time management skills. So create a really good, solid schedule. Like this is my designated time during the week, and that might look different. I get that with remote learning, your assignments, your everything kind of fluctuates. Quizzes come in at different times. So perhaps just looking at things at a week, right? So just developing a schedule that fits the demands of your academic responsibilities is going to be imperative for your success. Create a designated space for your learning. So I've encouraged students to create like a little nook in their room. Some students are using their closet. For full transparency, like I'm even like in my converted garage, right? So get creative with how you create a space where this can be for you to be able to be successful, where you can dedicate your mind and energy just to learning or just for you time. And know your academic resources. Again, I will talk about some of those in a little bit, but I guess I want to make sure it's here. It may not be here, so I'll talk about it now. But some of like your most useful student resources that are available for you are going to be like the counseling center, where I am, career services. The career center is going to be huge. Becoming familiar with like the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Office of Disability Services, your Student Health Center. Even the rec. When I encourage students to use the rec for physical wellness, it's important. And I understand like we're in the middle of like COVID, and so there are a ton of like video exercises and I can't even think of the word, like not webinars, but you get what I'm saying. There are some virtual exercises, virtual trainings for you to be able to do that you can utilize from home, and that's all offered through the rec center. So as we start getting now closer to, we've already identified how we can look at stress. So now you're saying, okay, I'm noticing stress physically or in my mind, like cognitively or emotionally. What do I do with this? I've acknowledged where it is. A part of achieving psychological well-being is understanding what part of yourself is needing a little more attention. So, what is psychological well-being? Psychological well-being consists of positive relationships with others, a personal mastery, having some autonomy, so independence, having a sense of purpose and meaning in your life, and then of course, like finding a way to continue to grow and develop personally, individually, in your identity. And so, one model that I think is really helpful is like this self model of wellness. And so, what it looks as like different parts of ourself. As a person, you're not just one interest. You have multiple interests. There's creativity in who you are. There are coping strategies that you use to maintain balance. There's a social side of you that engages with others. Even for those who are introverts, there's still a social part of you. There's an essential part of you, so your identity, the things that make up the things that are important to you, and then your physical self, right? Your actual presence and sense of being physically in this world. So understanding that well-being encompasses all of these areas of yourself, and in order to achieve wellness, it's like, what part of these selves am I kind of lacking or needing a little bit more of attention in? So I'll break those up for us. So the creative self is essentially the part of your personality that makes you the unique person that you are. So the official definition, which is there for the creative self, it says that they're the attributes that make you unique among others and in social interactions. And so for me, I tend to think of my creative self as how others in my life would understand me and how they would describe like my positive qualities. So there are actually 5 parts that will make up your creative self. And those are your like thinking, sorry. So your thinking, so how you perceive the world, they are your emotions, aspects of control. So how well you adapt to changes and situations that are outside of your control, having a positive sense of humor, and having a really good work ethic. And so, as you can see, it's like as we begin to have difficulty in any of these little areas where you may not be thinking positively or you're having difficulty adapting to your environment or the situation like COVID, we're going to notice a decline in our creative selves. And so we notice like our motivation may decline, we may be less optimistic. And what do we do to kind of move past that, right? Thinking about the coping self is how you create balance in your life. It's how you regulate or react to life events by using the resources that you have available in order to avoid like negative consequences. So more specifically, the coping self is controlled by your realistic beliefs. It's how you manage stress. It's how you define your worth and value, how you take care of yourself. So this is where self-care comes in. And a good way to check in on your coping self is to ask yourself, like, what can I do to cope with this specific situation? And genuinely pay attention to how you answer that. Are my expectations to get A's this semester with all these new learning challenges even realistic? Is it a good idea for me to study all day and all night? And to remind yourself that you deserve to have balance in your life. And so self care is so important. And to remember that you are resilient. So you are a great student, you've accomplished so much, and you're going to continue to do that. Your social self is just what you think it means. It is who you are, it is friendships, it is love, it is how you connect with other people. But what I would like to elaborate on is that Your social self is made up of both your personal and professional relationships, which will include your friendships, acquaintances, and any other relationships that you have in your life, whether that's like romantic or platonic. And so, even if just an example, like the Starbucks barista that I visit on Thursday mornings, her name is Amelie. She's amazing, and like every time I go through the drive-through, our little brief check-ins and hellos gives me just that boost that I need to kind of have that social interaction that I'm craving, right? And most of us are. So finding ways to get that social connection is just so important. I know it sounds silly, but it is. It's really valuable. So let's look at the essential self. So in my opinion, the essential self technically is the most important self. At one point or another, you have asked yourself, who am I? It's the age-old question, right? That's why we have philosophy. The essential self defines the core aspects of who you are and ultimately defines like how you see yourself and how you interact with the world. It's made up of four aspects or four different factors. That includes your spirituality. However, I recognize that some students aren't. There are no religious or spiritual connections, which is fine. Another aspect is like self-care. So how do you take care of yourself? Gender identity, and how you define that personally for yourself. Also looking at your cultural identity, so like your race, your ethnicity, your religious beliefs. And then one thing that's on there, which I'd like to add as like a fifth factor, I think is like your sexual identity. All of these parts of our essential self make up who we are. So if there are aspects in any of those areas, your spirituality, how you're caring for yourself, your own cultural identity, gender, sexuality, anything that is you're exploring or confused about or feeling overwhelmed with, that means that we have to pay more attention to that specific part of yourself, your essential self. And then lastly, the physical self. So remember the mind-body connection that I spoke about earlier. Exercise, it increases serotonin, which increases your mood and then will naturally relieve our stress. So exercise regularly, whether that be a virtual workout like I talked about with at the rec, or at home through the rec, or going for a walk. Eat a healthy diet when possible. Find a way to like reduce your intake of caffeine and sugar. Avoid substances like alcohol, avoid smoking cigarettes, doing drugs. Like I said, those things can negatively affect your body, changing your chemical balances, and then ultimately could worsen your symptoms of stress or anxiety or just your mood in general. So again, like I can't stress enough, the other part of our physical self that tends to get ignored as college students is going to be your sleep. So finding a way to make sure that you create a healthy sleep routine, which I kind of which I call a wind down routine, is going to be so important. So be creative with that. If that's 30 minutes or an hour before bed, be creative as to what that will look like. Move your computer or turn your computer off, put your phone away. It's just going to be a time where you have no other responsibilities than just you and your rest and relaxing for the rest of the week. So coping strategies during COVID-19, some of the things, aside from the things I've mentioned a little bit in the other slides, are going to be like limit your news consumption to like reliable sources. So a lot of the stuff that we're feeling, not just academic stressors, not just stress in our personal lives, but looking at just our political climate, our cultural climate, all of that stuff can put a lot of extra stress on us. So limiting your consumption to just reliable sources of information. These are to, of course, like the CDC and WHO. Each of you may have your own preferences for that as well. Balance new intake with other activities. So as you're getting busier in your semester, as finals are approaching, make sure to find some time to do things that you enjoy. Reconnect with some of the things. If you're creative and like art, re-engage in that. There's music, there's reading. Learning a new language would be really ambitious, but for those of you who have the time and can incorporate that, do that as well. Create and follow a daily routine. So we talked about that. Create a wake and sleep time routine. Create routines for work, for school, exercise. Stay connected with friends and family. And remember like some of your happier moments, right? So just follow a daily routine and do things that are going to create balance in that area. It's so easy to get really distracted and to pull back from the people we have in our lives. So stay virtually connected to others. There's FaceTime, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's texting. There's a whole bunch of ways that we can stay connected. Yes, it's not the same as being in person, but it's what we have. And that's what I stress. This is temporary. Um, and I hope that we're past the middle of the pandemic and closer to the end. But just keep in mind that this is only temporary and this is the way we have to connect with others right now. So let's try and maintain that as much as possible. And then, of course, taking breaks from social media when that's effective for you to do so. So as this is pretty much coming a little closer to the end of the presentation, and what I would like for us to do just for a couple of minutes is to practice self-compassion. So this is a coping strategy that I highly recommend for students. And so this is something you can do on your own. You can do this at home. You can do this while meditating, in between an assignment. And so what a self-compassion break means is, and we'll practice this now, like if each of you can kind of think of just a situation in your life right now that's difficult and not something, maybe something pertaining to school, maybe something pertaining to, I don't know, a conflict with a roommate or a family member, just something kind of that you're dealing with right now. And as you think about that, think about how that is causing you stress. Remember how we talked about the cognitive symptoms of stress, physical, emotional, behavioral. How is this difficult situation or this stress affecting you in your body? Pay attention to where that is, acknowledge where that is, if that's in your shoulders, if that's in your chest. Pay attention to where that is in your body. Acknowledge that emotional discomfort because doing so is going to help you to know what coping strategy you need to use for that. So, as we've done that, I want you to think about in this moment of this stress, of this suffering, of this difficult situation, notice that the stress that you're feeling in your body, that this might hurt. Maybe you have a pain in your shoulder, maybe in the neck, wherever you felt that stress, maybe there's a discomfort in your body in that. What I want you to do now is to acknowledge that as uncomfortable as this experience is and this feeling is in your body, that going through difficult times, suffering is common for all humanity. Understand that you're not the only one that feels this way. You aren't alone. There are other students, there are other people who are struggling just as you are with something similar or as difficult as what you're dealing with right now. And then the third thing would be to remind yourself to be kind, to give yourself grace, to give yourself permission to say, I'm going through a difficult time, but I will make it through this. And so what I hope is that as each of you recognize struggles or things that are going on in your life, even if it's not just pertaining to academic stressors, finding ways to be able to include like a self-compassion break would be so helpful. It means that you're being present in the here and now with what you're experiencing, and you're not just rushing on to the next assignment, because doing that will only cause you to have more stress later and for things to pile up. And so this is just one coping strategy. I'll provide some other here as we talk about self-care. So having self-compassion is so important. Practicing self-care is another tool. And so I know that sounds so cliche. It goes beyond just going out and having like a mani and a pedi or watching a football game or a sports game with a friend or whatever. There's a lot more to self-care. Self-care is a way that you ensure that you are taking care of you. That could include spending some time alone, right? If you're feeling overwhelmed and overstimulated with everything else going in your life, understand that self-care is not selfish. You cannot give anything to anyone else if you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed. You can't concentrate on your academic demands. You can't be there for your friends and family. if you yourself are not replenished. So thinking about how you can cope with stress, be more responsive versus reactive. And so what that means is plan for some of these things. If we're talking about academics, we know at the end of the semester, things are getting more stressful. So that means that we know finals are coming, your bigger assignments are coming. So plan for that versus getting now to like mid-November and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so behind. I can't do this. I'm not going to do it. And at that point, you're reacting versus responding. And then keep in mind that whatever self-care habit you create, whether that's like meditation or reading, journaling, going for walks, whatever habit it is that you create, make sure you make that, whatever coping strategy you create, make sure to make that a habit. And the benefits of that, it'll prevent burnout. It maximizes your potential. It helps you to stay motivated. It improves your quality of life, and it increases like your physical and mental resources to be able to handle with stresses in other areas of your life. So now I would like to just take a little time to talk about the services that we offer through the Counseling Center. So for example, TAO, or Therapy Assistance Online, this is a great resource. TAO, it's an interactive, easy to use like online tools, self-help tool. It's a program that helps provide support for symptoms of anxiety, for depression, and any other kind of concerns. There are wonderful exercises on there for meditation, for mindfulness. And so those are all things that are free for all students. And you can access TAO by going to the Counseling Center's website. And underneath, I want to say it's under useful resources and tools, I think it is. But it's one of our Counseling Center tabs, and right there it'll have TAO. Just click on it and you can create an account with your Texas State email. Another perk about this tool, of course, is that you can use it 24/7. You have access to it all the time. You do it at your own pace, which means you can fit it into your super already busy schedules. And so at the Counseling Center, we provide right now telemental health services, which means that all of our therapy appointments are virtual. This allows for greater access for all of our students. So this means that students living either in San Marcos or living in any of our areas in Texas, you all as Texas State students can utilize our counseling services if you feel like the tools that you have just aren't working to kind of help you navigate the stressors and the pressures that you have going on. We have group therapy services as well throughout the semester. Some of our groups are closed, but again, if you navigate to our Counseling Center website, you can see all of our group therapy services that are available. There are urgent services. So for those students who may find themselves in a crisis, and the crisis being like having thoughts of wanting to like kill yourself or to kill or hurt others, you could always call the center during our business hours and be connected with a clinician on call. And I want to also provide like our crisis hotline here for Hays County, which is available on this slide. And of course, on our website, on the Counseling Center's website, there are self-help resources. There are numerous webinars that have been created by other staff clinicians, doctoral interns like myself. And so there's like a whole array of things for you all to choose and to go back and view at a later time. So there's tons of resources that we've made available for our students. And so the last thing, of course, is like if you still feel that you're having difficulty managing stress and you want to talk to a counselor at the Counseling Center, please reach out to us. You can give us a call at 512-245-2208. It's there. And you'll get connected with an appointment for a consultation. It may be a couple of weeks out if that is the case, but we will work you in and make sure that we can accommodate your needs in one way or another. Okay. So this is at the very end of the presentation. And so this is just to provide feedback based on the presentation and the information provided. You can use the link that's right there. You can use your cell phone to take a picture of the QR code, and the information that you'll need is the information there. So you can always take a picture of this screen. And that is all I have for everyone today. I would like to, I think I can open it up for questions if there are any questions that came through Q&A. And I will maybe look at those. I don't see anything there. So that is the end of the presentation. If anyone has any questions or, oh, I see a hand raised. And as funny as this is, I'm not sure how to navigate that. So let's see. Yes, so this recording will be available for you to watch later. I don't know how long it will take, but it will be available maybe within a couple of weeks. I think I'll give the biggest, I think that'll be the best bet. And can I show the slide for TAL? Absolutely. Let me go back to that. Let's see, so here is the link for TAL. Are there any more questions? Maybe questions for me or just about our services or things you would like further clarification on? And I'd be glad to answer that for you. Well, if, let's see, managing all of the different websites from instructors. Yeah, so I thinking your question is, how do we manage all the different websites coming in from our different instructors? That one is definitely a challenge that I'm hearing from all of our students. And what I have suggested is really just creating some kind of like a schedule or something just written out that lets you know when your assignments are due. And the reason I say that is because once you have an idea of what all is due, it takes away some of the pressure of knowing what website or what I don't know what like service media you have to use for those assignments. And that's really what I've suggested for our students is really just creating some kind of like schedule to keep all of your assignments on track. So that way it makes it easier for you to just know that this is the assignment that's due. It kind of alleviates some of the pressure of like being able to navigate these multiple websites that the professors are giving. The other thing is saying is like being really transparent with your professors. If you're having difficulty kind of keeping up with things, let them know that some of these some of this is not being helpful or how can they better support you. Be open with that. That is something that you can do. And if that doesn't help and you don't feel like you're getting the response that you need, then reaching out to maybe like an academics advisor, or if there's a TA for that specific class, reaching out to them for some extra feedback that can be conveyed to your professor and the learning style. Yeah, I just saw the last message. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. If not, I'd be glad to chat about it a little later at another time. Okay. Yeah, for sure. You're welcome. So I guess that is it. Like, I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to sit and talk with everybody. And like I said, if you have any questions or you'd like to reach out to the counseling center, I will go ahead and just put that last screen back up. And so that way, at least you have the information to reach out to us and the links to the websites that have our additional resources. And of course, this PowerPoint will be available there as well, or the webinar. All right. So I guess that's it. Take care, everybody.